Good day. We continue our discussion on publishing with the next stage after setting the foundations of reading as well as of scheduling. This is the morning session of your journey towards publication. Advancing your argument. Welcome everyone to the morning session of your publication journey. Today, today's focus is on the single most critical element of academic writing, developing and articulating a strong, compelling argument. Over the course of this session, we'll dig into how to tell the difference between a mere topic and a true argument, how to test your ideas with others, and how to make your central claim the backbone of your writing. Think of this session as a foundation for building publishable, persuasive scholarship. Let's begin by understanding academic arguments. This slide defines an argument as discourse that is intended to persuade, leading from premises to conclusion, and supported by evidence. When we talk about an argument in academic writing, we're not talking about a fight or a heated debate. An argument here means a structured, persuasive presentation of ideas. It's about guiding your readers from your starting points, your premises, to a specific conclusion. The goal is to back up that conclusion with solid evidence so that it can stand strong even when doubts arise. At its core, argument isn't just about what you believe. It's about showing your readers why they should believe it also. And it is the task of the person who's writing to be able to guide their readers to the point that they are also able to understand what is the point you are trying to make. And this is actually the very reason why many journals reject articles or publications, the absence of a clear argument. And that's the reason why we need to be able to pay attention at these early on. The 5 elements of an argument. So, before we go to the myths, we need to pay attention first. Think of your argument like a spine of your article. Gulugod. It needs 5 essential qualities. First, it boils down to one significant idea. Second, that idea should be stated clearly. Ideally, in just 1 or 2 sentences and even early in the piece. Third, the entire article must be organized around that central claim. Fourth, The argument should grow out of scholarly conversations, not just your own musings. And finally, it must be backed up with credible evidence. If you nail these five, your readers, as well as your reviewers, will know exactly what you're arguing and why it matters. This is where, as I've said a while ago, many submissions stumble. They don't have a clear argument. And editors repeatedly say that absence of an argument is the single most common and frustrating problem they see. Articles get rejected because they feel like a pile of notes or because the claim is buried, vague, or missing entirely. Remember, a journal article without a strong early argument often doesn't even get a second look. Now, let's look at some of the myths in publication. Myth 1. Only groundbreaking work gets published. The truth is, most published work is incremental. Let's tackle a myth that haunts many first-time authors. The belief that only groundbreaking, earth-shattering discoveries are publishable. In reality, most published scholarship is incremental. It's not about rewriting history. It's about adding one thoughtful brick to an already existing wall of knowledge. Journals publish work that is careful, well argued, and positioned within scholarly conversations. Even if it's not the first or the flashiest on the subject, so relax. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to get published. Second myth: more ideas make a better argument. The truth is, one strong idea matters. Another myth is that cramming your article with lots of ideas makes it stronger. In fact, the opposite is true. Readers and editors want one clear central argument. Imagine trying to fit a dozen paradigms, 50 authors, and 3 continents into a 30-paged article. It simply doesn't work. Publishing success comes from articulating one important idea well, not from throwing everything you know onto the page. Think quality, not quantity. There is a Jesuit saying that says, non multa sed multum. And we always say it's not about multa or multo. It actually points to not many, but much, which is very important for publishing also. Not many, but much. So you don't have to say a lot. You only need to focus about what you say. So what actually gets published? There are three pathways now to consider. One, new evidence, old approach. Two, old evidence, new approach. And third, new pairing of old elements. So what actually makes it into journals? There are three main routes, as I explained. First, new evidence, old approach. You provide fresh data to support established theories. Second, old evidence, new approach. You reinterpret existing data through a new lens, which often requires deep expertise. And third, new pairing of old elements. So you link ideas or evidence that haven't been connected before. At the end of the day, publishing is about saying something new about something old. And let's emphasize that. Saying something new about something old. The main reasons articles get rejected. Arguments are not stated clearly and not stated early enough. Editors are unanimous. The number one reason articles get rejected is weak, hidden, or late arguments. If your central claim isn't front and center, the article feels unanchored. One editor rejects article if the argument isn't in the first two pages. Another wants it within the first two paragraphs. That tells you how crucial it is to make your argument clear and visible early on. If you don't say it early, you're not actually saying it at all. Now, we need to ask ourselves whether your statement is an argument or not. So, these will list, for example, tests like agree or disagree, your gut test, your immediate dispute, and puzzle answer. How can you check if your statement is really an argument? Here are 4 quick tests. First, the agree or disagree test. If people can agree or disagree or agree to disagree, it's an argument. If it is just a fact, something that cannot be contested, it isn't. Second, the gut test. Does saying it out loud make you a bit nervous? That tension usually means you're saying something debatable. Then, it's an argument. Third, the immediate dispute test. If people jump in to agree or argue, you've got something real. And finally, the puzzle test. Does it answer an open question or explanation or explain something puzzling? If yes, then the chance that it is an argument is high. So what masquerades as an argument? The topic test. A common rookie or one who's still starting to write. Mistake is a rookie mistake is confusing a topic with an argument. Saying I'm examining carnivals in small Pampanga towns or Pangasinan towns is just a subject area, not an argument. But if you push further and say, for example, carnivals drove young people away from small towns by portraying a more diverse world, that's a claim. The key difference is that an argument takes a stance while a topic just names something. A topic just names something. Another thing that masquerades as a argument is an observation. Observations are not arguments. For instance, Adichie's half of a yellow sun has a non-linear chronology. This is simply descriptive. But when you interpret it and say that nonlinear structure mirrors the fragmented experience of war, now you're making an argument. Arguments emerge when you move from describing what you see to explaining why it matters. Next test, the obvious test. Sometimes writers make claims that are so broad that no one would argue against them. Like colonialism was bad, or sexism harms girls. These aren't wrong, but they're too obvious to count as arguments. Scholarship thrives on nuance. Instead, be specific. For example, British colonizers in 1950s Kenya portrayed themselves as civilizers while committing atrocities during the Mau Mau uprising. That's precise. That's debatable, that's meaningful. Let's go to more tests, no? Another thing that masquerades as an argument. Uh, sorry, checking. The variable test. Another trap is confusing variables with arguments, saying, I'm studying how X affects Y isn't an argument. It's just setting up a research question. The missing piece is how they're related. For example, instead of psychological state impacts tinnitus perception, a stronger argument is PTSD worsens tinnitus symptoms more than other psychological states. That moves from naming variables to making a claim about their relationship. Wait, there's still more, no? Another thing that masquerades as an argument is when we can consider gaps and speculation tests. Saying there's a gap in the literature is not an argument. It's just a justification. Likewise, policy recommendations or predictions aren't arguments by themselves. The solution is to state what your evidence shows immediately, instead of no one has studied this. Say what your research actually reveals. Remember, arguments should be based on proof, not just gaps or wishes for the future. Not just gaps or wishes for the future. Now let's focus on creating argument. This is Posusta's instant thesis formula. If you're struggling to craft a clear thesis, Posusta's formula is a lifesaver. It goes like this. Although, and then you acknowledge an existing view, nevertheless, and then you state your idea, because then you give supporting evidence. This keeps you grounded in the scholarly conversation. It also forces you to take a stand and pushes you to back it up. Think of it as a quick, reliable way to transform scattered thoughts into a publishable thesis. Let's look at it again. Although, and you acknowledge existing view, nevertheless, and then you state your idea, because, and then you give your supporting evidence. Although there are more alternative templates to consider, let's discuss these. Yes, you are correct. There are other ways to build an argument. Simpson's template helps you say something a bit surprising. It takes this form. By looking at X, we see Y, which most people miss. This is important because Z. By looking at X, we see Y, which is most people missed. This is important because Z. Wendy Belcher, offers more journal-ready templates, starting with identifying a debate, then placing your argument in relation to it, backed by your study. But remember, templates are tools. They give you structure when you're stuck, and you can revise it or adapt it when needed. Which is my way of saying, if it helps, use it. If not, it's okay. Now, let's focus on reshaping non-arguments into arguments. Reshaping arguments into non-arguments. Often, we don't land on an argument in one shot. It evolves through conversation. This page walks through an example where a statement about a novel shifts from "I want to tell you about this book," which is not even a topic, to Annie John shows how colonial education caused familial alienation, which is a very solid argument. The key takeaway is that arguments are born through refining, talking, and reworking, which is my way of saying it's not in a single draft. Don't expect to be able to write your paper in a single draft. It doesn't happen that way. No? And I will reiterate, it doesn't happen that way. It's more complicated than that. Now let's move. How do we map or make strong arguments? So far we've said what arguments are not. Now let's focus on bettering these forward, no? Of making these better even. Okay? So a strong argument isn't bulletproof. And it doesn't need to be. In fact, the best scholarship acknowledges limits, engages with opposing voices, and even embraces uncertainty. Citing counter arguments makes your work more credible. Admitting limitations shows intellectual honesty. And recognizing uncertainty pushes you to think deeper. Remember, persuasiveness often comes from showing you've considered multiple angles, not from pretending you're untouchable. And there's more to learn from that. And it is okay. When we write articles, we need to think like a lawyer, not a detective. When you're writing, don't think like a detective. Think like a lawyer. What's the difference between the two? Detectives report everything they find in the order it appears. Every clue, every interview, every suspect. That's not what a publishable article looks like. A lawyer, on the other hand, presents a clear accusation, supports it with the most relevant evidence, anticipates counterpoints, and ignores distractions. Research, like a detective, is like a detective, or research like a detective, but when you write, be a lawyer. Argument first, evidence second. Argument first, evidence second. Now let's look at evidence organized versus argument organized writing. This page compares two abstracts. The weak version lists data, lots of it, but doesn't connect it to a bigger point. The strong version, on the other hand, starts with context, explains why the topic matters, and then ties evidence back to a claim. Both mentions findings, but only one feels like it's driven by an argument. The lesson: don't let your evidence run the show. Always keep your argument in charge. I'll repeat that. Don't let your evidence run the show. Always keep your argument in charge. But why evidence organized articles are common? No? Why are these very common? Many of us end up organizing our papers around evidence instead of argument. Why? There are three main traps: admiration, fieldwork, and investment. If you admire a thinker or text too much, you may spend pages praising it instead of analyzing it. This is the scene of philosophers or those who are trained in philosophy or theology or even literature. If you did field work, you may feel pressure to represent every detail of your experience. And if you invested hours collecting data, you may want to include it all. But remember, articles aren't about representing everything you saw. They're about advancing one argument. And that's where the distinction happens. Let's look at the rise of argument in academic writing. Since the 1960s, the phrase, I argue that, or I argue that, has exploded in published work. Editors now expect arguments early and even explicitly. And that's true across almost all fields. In fact, 83% of humanities and social science editors say they'd consider publishing revised theses that state clear arguments. The takeaway, if your argument isn't upfront and visible, you'll fall behind the current standard. If your argument isn't upfront and visible, you'll fall behind the current standard. So let's look at your activity for this morning. And as I said, you have a week to submit these. Here's the first activity. Test your argument. Step 1. Revisit it. Make sure you still like it and that it passes at least a few of the argument tests I've identified a while ago. Step 2. Share it with 2 people. One in your field, a fellow sociologist or a fellow psychologist or a fellow educator, and one outside. Watch the reactions. Step 3. Revise based on feedback. Don't worry about perfection. The point is clarity and flexibility. Think of these as a stress testing your argument in real life conversations. In real life conversations. Second activity, sorry, typo. Now that you've tested your argument, review your article, the paper you're supposed to work on. if your argument changed drastically, draft a rough new introduction and outline so you can restructure your piece. If your argument only shifted lightly, review with a lawyer's brief in mind. Is everything tied back to your main claim? This is about recentering your writing around your argument and not simply polishing sentences. Highlighting your argument. A simple but powerful exercise. Print your article and highlight, yes, highlight every sentence where your argument appears. Then flip it through. Does your highlighter show up in the intro or body or conclusion? If you've gone 5 pages without seeing your color, you've lost your argument. This exercise will help you see the bigger picture of visibility and not just line edits. Visibility and not just line edits. Checking for early and clearly. Remember the golden rule. Your argument should appear in the first 3 pages. And even for some editors, within the first 2 or 3 paragraphs. If your article delays, restructure your introduction so that the argument comes earlier. Move background material elsewhere, but don't bury your main claim. Early and clearly is the universal expectation now. And I hope you'll stick to it. Point first, evidence second. Every paragraph should start with the point, then the evidence. Don't make readers slog through data only to find out at the end what it was supposed to mean. Lead with your claim. Lead with your claim. That way, readers always know why the evidence matters. This one shift, point first, evidence second, can completely transform your article's clarity. Point first, evidence second. Because we're already operating with supposed paper drafts. Remember, we're not looking at what if I'm writing a new argument. That's not even the type of thing that I am encouraging you to do, because that's going to be very difficult and very conflicting, huh? Very difficult and very conflicting in the long run. So I hope you will not do that, no? Start from the beginning. I hope no, don't do that. Don't start from the beginning. Okay? Uh focus. Take a look now at your body's article, or your article's body. Sorry, body's article. Article's body. If it is organized by the order you found information, or by the chronology of events, chances are it's evidence driven, not argument driven. I'll repeat that. If you look at how you present your evidence, the way you gathered them, or in terms of the chronology of events, the probability is these are evidence driven, not argument driven. Instead, focus on structure sections around what you want to say about the evidence. So, if a paragraph doesn't serve your argument, cut it out. Don't let evidence dictate the shape of your article. Your argument should be in control, not the other way around. Okay? Should be in control, not the other way around. Refining your introduction and conclusion. Here's a common problem. Your intro says one argument, but your conclusion says another. That happens when your thinking shifts as you write. Go back and align them. Your intro should set up the argument early, and your conclusion should reinforce the same claim, not contradict it. Standardize your argument across both ends so the article feels more cohesive. Let's look at the second thing you'll do, no? Articles, activities 4 to 5. Today and this week, you need to revise your argument. Revision is where the magic happens. Use your highlights and notes as a roadmap. Expect your argument to shift a little as you revise. That's normal. Work iteratively. The process isn't linear. It's recursive. The more you revise around your argument now, the less work you'll have to do it later. Now, what are key ideas? I'm not really sure where this ended, but in the slides, sorry, my apologies for my Starlink, but I suspect it ended here. So, as I was saying a while ago, revision is really where everything happens, no? So, and here it's okay that your argument will shift a little as you revise. It's perfectly normal. And that's how we write. We work iteratively. The process isn't linear, it's recursive. And the more we revise, the less work we'll have to do later. This is the reason why you have a lot of space to do the revision now, because it's very difficult to do it later. Let's look at key takeaways. So, as I was saying, let's summarize. One, publishable article revolve around one central idea. Publishable articles revolve around one central idea. That idea should be stated early and clearly, ideally within the first few paragraphs. Second, organize like a lawyer. Argument first, evidence second. Test your arguments with others. Listen to their opinion. Build in counterpoints and keep it visible throughout your paper. Remember the primary rule of research: no read, no write. If it disappears for more than 4 pages, bring it back. These are your keys to a stronger, publishable piece. Please do not forget it. Now, let's look at common arguments or common problems and solutions. Common pitfalls include mistaking topics, observations, and variables for arguments. The fix is always the same: push further. Turn I'm studying carnivals into carnivals caused youth migration. Turn the novel uses nonlinear time into nonlinear time mirrors the chaos of war. Always move from description to interpretation, from fact to claim, from fact to claim. If you're stuck, lean on templates. They're not cages, they're springboards. Try Posusta's formula, Simpson's magic thesis, or Belcher's journal-ready structures. These give you a baseline to play with. You can adjust, resist, or refine them, but they ensure you're making an argument rather than just circling a topic. Focus. Next, understanding article types and that gets published. Here, this is also still based on no read, no write. Let's put some numbers to it. About 35% of articles present new evidence using existing theories. About 25% apply new theories to old evidence. And around 40% create originality by pairing old elements in new ways. Notice the trend. Most scholarships isn't revolutionary. It's careful, it's strategic, and it's incremental. The detective versus lawyer analogy in practice. This analogy really drives it home, I think. A detective's report lists every piece of evidence in the order it was found, detailed but unfocused. A lawyer's brief lays out a clear accusation, selects key evidence, anticipates objections, and stays on message. That's how you should write, like a lawyer. Focused, selective, persuasive. Research like a detective, yes, but write like a lawyer. Why do evidence first articles fail? Again, as I explained, three traps: admiration, too much praise, not enough analysis; investment, feeling you must include every bit of data you collected; and representation, trying to capture everything extraordinary about your subject. But journals doesn't want representation. Journals don't want this. They want argument. Clifford Geertz put it best. Don't travel the world just to count cats in Zanzibar. Focus on your argument. As you can see, the data proves it. Argument-driven writing is on the rise. And as I said, since the 1960s, the use of "I argue that" has doubled in frequency year after year. Whatever was acceptable in the past is no longer enough. Clear, visible argumentation is the gold standard now. Revise your work accordingly. And make your work visible throughout. Make your work visible throughout. No? Having an argument isn't enough. You have to keep it visible. State it early in the introduction, bring it back in the body paragraphs, and restate it in the conclusion. As I said, and we'll say it again, don't let your argument disappear for more than 2 or 3 pages. Readers need those signposts to stay anchored to your claim. Focus. Focus. We've already emphasized the highlighting exercise on finding your argument. And we've also emphasized the point first, evidence second golden rule. No? This page drives home that golden rule. No? Readers should never wonder why they're reading a fact. Every paragraph should open with a claim. Paragraph, not just a paper. Paragraph with a claim. Then supporting details. And if your fact buries the point, revise. Bring your main idea up front, then let the evidence follow. We've also spoke about reorganizing your body sections. We've already done that. Introduction and conclusion alignment. We've already done that. These are just guides. And now let's look at when your argument changes. If your argument has shifted drastically, don't panic. Draft a new rough introduction that reflects the new claim. Then create a fresh outline to see how your evidence will support it. Then reread your draft to see what can be salvaged and what needs to go. This is like renovating your house. Keep what still works, but don't be afraid to tear down walls to fit the new design. I'm almost done, don't worry. Building opposing viewpoints. This is also important. As an academic argument isn't about yelling louder than your opponent. It's about engaging thoughtfully with multiple perspectives. Don't ignore scholarship that contradicts you. Cite it, acknowledge it, and show how your claim still holds. Anticipate rebuttals and be honest about where your argument might break down. Paradoxically, admitting limits and engaging critics actually makes your work better. The power of uncertainty in argument. Some of the best scholarship grows out of uncertainty. One example, a scholar writing about two 17th century Ethiopian women considered the responses of very different audiences: traditionalists, queer theorists, activists. And by holding all those perspectives in mind, the article became more persuasive, not less. Embracing uncertainty forces you to refine your argument against multiple viewpoints, which makes it richer and more convincing. Arguments are iterative. No? Remember, arguments are never born perfect. Never. They evolve. First, you draft a version based on what you know. Then you test it with colleagues, revise it as you work through evidence, and refine it as feedback comes in. Eventually, your argument stabilizes, but it will likely keep shifting in small ways right up until submission. That's not a flaw. It's how scholarly writing works. So let's look at practical revision strategies. Revisions isn't just about staring at the screen. No, don't do that. Don't just stare at the screen. Try visual strategies. Highlight where your argument appears and where it's missing. Print sections and physically rearrange them on a table. Sometimes moving things around makes new patterns clear. Share drafts with a peer who can tell you where your argument disappears. These hands-on approaches help you see structures in a fresh way. Again, as I've said, put your arguments early. I've said even earlier. No? There are challenges to that. And revision challenges are normal, don't forget. Maybe your intro is clogged with background that delays your argument. Move that elsewhere. Maybe your argument drives straight into evidence without context. Fix that with a stronger opening. Or maybe your argument vanishes for pages. Add topic sentences to bring it back. The bigger the mistake, contradicting yourself between intro and conclusion is very, very important. Align those two. I'm in my last few slides, no? On the 50th slide, actually. And here we see the role of topic sentences. Remember, topic sentences are your secret weapon. Every paragraph should start with one, clearly stating what that paragraph will do and how it connects to your overall argument. Then, after the topic sentence, bring your evidence. Don't bury the point at the end or leave readers wondering why the details matter. Topic sentences make sure your argument doesn't disappear mid-article. Track your revisions. Revising for argument takes time. In fact, takes a lot of time. So keep yourself on track. Set clear goals for each session. Maybe revise the intro today and the body tomorrow. Track your time so you know you're making steady progress, and celebrate small wins, like clarifying one section or tightening one argument, and stay flexible. It's better to spend extra time now than to rewrite from scratch later. That's why if you think it's a slow course, no, I'm giving you enough time because later on it will be terrible. Terrible, as I said. Pause and reflect. Pause and reflect. How has your understanding of the argument changed through this process? Did you discover gaps, face challenges, or surprise yourself during revision? Taking time to reflect helps you internalize these lessons so you can carry them forward in your writing. The more conscious you are, the stronger your future papers will be. So congratulations, you've come a long way in this morning session. You've learned what makes an argument different from a topic or observation. You've tested your argument on others. You've reviewed your articles for argument visibility, and you've started revising so your central claim shines through. That's a huge step towards a publishable paper. And that's more than enough, in fact, for a publishable paper. I think that's good enough for the first phase. And we will look at the succeeding ones in the pre-recorded lecture for this afternoon session. Thank you very much and have a good day.